slowly. We're going to be recording this session just for your knowledge, and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for later viewing. Hi, my name is Tiara Austin. I use she and they pronouns. I am the Artist Engagement Coordinator here at the Laundromat Project. Thank you for joining us for the 2023 Create Change Info Session. I'm joined here by my colleague, Andrea Gil Garcia, as well as a few colleagues in the background who are going to be supporting us with tech and answering some questions in the chat for you all. We would like to begin this session with a land acknowledgement as we begin all of our sessions at the Laundromat Project. We at the Laundromat Project respectfully acknowledge that our primary location of operations at 1476 Fulton Street in Brooklyn, New York, sits on the occupied and unceded lands of the Canarsie, who are part of the Munsee Lenape. We recognize them as the original stewards of this land and pay respects to their elders, past, present, and future. I invite you to join me in acknowledging the histories of the land where you are currently gathered, and pay respect and gratitude to its original stewards.
Thank you, Tiara. My name is Andrea Gil Garcia. I use she, her pronouns. We are excited for this year's open call and what we have in store for the upcoming cohort fellows and artists. During this info session, we will take you through the program overview and guidelines, hear from one of our program alum, and close with questions you may have for us. If you do have any questions while we're presenting, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end at our live Q&A session. If you have any technical needs, feel free to drop them in the comment box as well. We are recording this session and we'll make it available for reference afterwards via YouTube. And I want to start by mentioning the Laundromat Project's mission. The Laundromat Project's mission is to advance artists and neighbors as change agents in their own communities. Next slide. We envision a world in which artists and neighbors in communities of color work together to unleash the power of creativity to transform lives. We do this by making sustained investments in growing a community of multiracial, multi-generational, and multidisciplinary artists and neighbors committed to societal change by supporting their art making, community building, and leadership development. Next slide. We are a values-based organization, and here are the 6 values that guide our mission and vision. They are nurture creativity, be POC-centered, create change, value place, write our own histories, be propelled by love, and practice abundance. You can learn more about these values by visiting our website. As our values are the core of who we are as an org and the way the Create Change program is structured, we do ask for applicants to share which LP value resonates with them the most. This question simply prompts an understanding of values, alignments, and engagement with the prospective candidates. Next slide. On this slide, it says making a home in Bed-Stuy. There's an image of the street which shows the LP storefront and an illustration from that of our former LP fellow created by Ciabel Chicotel, which has helped us imagine and vision the space for ourselves. Next slide. COVID-19, statement that we would all like to acknowledge, given the continued presence of the COVID-19 in our communities. All accepted Create Change program participants are required to be fully vaccinated for the COVID-19, have received both doses of a 2-dose vaccine or a single dose of 1-dose vaccine, and must provide proof of vaccination upon request by the organization. In addition, masks will be required while indoors at the LP storefront location, as well as outdoor conducting official LP programs. Requests for potential accommodations can be considered should they be necessary.
Next slide. Alrighty, thank you so much, Andrea, for grounding us in our mission and giving a little bit of a context for our program and the place that we're in. And yeah, so Create Change, the overview. Since 2005, Create Change has supported more than 200 multidisciplinary artists and 80 community-based projects. The 2023 program will mark our 18th residency cohort and 13th fellowship cohort. Create Change began with the residency program, which invited artists to develop projects within their local laundromats to engage their neighbors around art in their local context, i.e. the name Laundromat Project. But today, artists produce public art projects across a wide range of sites, from street corners to gardens to theater stages and community centers, and the list goes on and on. We've expanded into the virtual space most recently. The fellowship program was launched as a platform to support the professional development of emerging artists who are interested in social practice and community engagement. The fellowship program was created to complement the rigor of art making that occurred during the residency, but also thinking about a equally rigorous workshop training that we can offer to participants. So during the Create Change program, both artists in residence and fellows will be able to meet with a diverse roster of activists and art professionals and curators and change agents who will be offering diverse strategies for creating work at the intersection of art and civic action. And so the program is really structured for artists to learn and create within this cohort setting. We think about community building a lot within the cohort of artists who will be selected, and also practice peer-to-peer exchanges and collaboration. Next slide. All right, so to provide a bit of an overview for our for one of our frameworks for our pedagogy, there we go. There are 3 learning blocks that our curriculum is shaped around. They reflect our tagline, make art, build community, and create change. And so participants will work with this framework throughout the program, and it kind of shapes and acts as sort of like a rubric to guide us through the program. And so the first learning block, Make Art, asks, what role does art, culture, and creativity play in making meaning, shifting narratives, and creating change in the world? Participants examine a range of artworks across the field of social practice and creative placemaking that align with the LP's approaches to cultural asset mapping and leadership development. Next slide. The second learning block, our Building Community learning block, really invites us to explore how art and cultural practices build trust and accountability with community. So in this portion, participants explore fostering attunement with community rhythms, building reciprocal partnerships, and the art of meeting people where they are. Next slide. And our last learning block for our program is the Create Change learning block. So in this learning block, participants understand, kind of address the power and leadership in general. And so within that, understanding that power exists within ourselves and community, we think about how we can creatively leverage power and leverage equity for positive societal change. And participants will explore personal and collective relationships to race, power, and privilege in order to facilitate social transformation through their art and cultural practices. Next slide. Yes, so I said that the kind of learning blocks kind of directly map onto our program schedule. So this is a quick outline of how we interpret those blocks through our schedule, which at this stage is definitely subject to change. And you'll see that within the guidelines. So this year's program will encompass 6 workshops, a series of group coaching sessions for both the artists in residence and fellows. And both programs will culminate in final presentation moments. There are also elements of public programming for the cohort to shape. And the flow is generally meeting every 2 weeks, though there are definitely more frequent meetups as we move toward the ending of the fellowship program. And some things that aren't reflected in this schedule are weekly office hours that we provide everybody who's a part of the program, as well as offerings to connect with our growing alumni community. And lastly, we are anticipating hosting the program in a hybrid format. So some engagements are going to be scheduled to take place in person, and others will be virtual. And the in-person engagements will be taking place at our storefront space in Bed-Stuy at 1476 Fulton Street, and others will be scheduled through Zoom. And this is also definitely dependent on how we're able to safely gather in place. Next slide.
Thanks, Tiara. And so I want to provide a brief overview of the fellowship program. It's for artists and cultural producers who are interested in developing and deepening a collaborative, community-based, and socially engaged creative practice. The program is shaped as an intensive learning practice model that seeks to develop a workshop and generate ideas incorporating the LP values and community-based methodology as a foundational approach. This year, fellows will collaborate with one another and the LP to design community-engaged programs in various public squares in Bed-Stuy. We will be selecting up to 12 fellows to participate in this year's program. Next slide. The fellowship program offers a series of workshops, trainings, cultural organizing coaching sessions, and weekly office hours with LP staff. The program will culminate in a public presentation featuring fellows' work in June of 2023. The fellowship is a 6-month program scheduled to take place from January through June. The entire program will be conducted virtually via a series of digital platforms. Each participant will receive a modest stipend of $1,000, which is a new feature of the program. Next slide. Eligible candidates are at least 21 years of age, are not enrolled in a degree-seeking program, are committed to working collaboratively with cohort members, are in alignment with LP values and POC-centered principles, demonstrate a practice or deep interest in socially and community engaged art, are familiar with the cultural history and local issues impacting communities of color, and are based in New York City. Next slide.
To transition to the residency program, the residency program is a flagship program, which I mentioned a little earlier, and it supports the development of participatory and community-attuned creative projects by artists of color working within their community, and that's something that's really special and important to us, working within one's own community. And community is really explored broadly here at the LP. We think about, communities of geography, so, neighbors and things like that, but we also consider communities of affinity and identity. So just thinking about complex ways of classifying community and very open in that regard. And just to note that in the application, we do ask you to describe your connection with or investment in the community that you're proposing to let's see. Our residency program has shifted to accommodate our current moment. So this will allow artists to propose projects that occur fully digitally. You also may elect for your projects to occur in person or a combination of both. And we've seen that throughout the years that, folks are definitely more hybrid oriented. And for those who are looking to carry out in-person projects, the application does ask you to reflect on how you will think about the safety of community members. So that's a portion of the application. And next year, we're going to be offering 2 residency programs. One is our long-standing residency program, which is open to artists of color developing community-based projects across the 5 boroughs. And in addition to that program, we're also inviting artists of color who live and work in Bed-Stuy specifically to apply to the Bed-Stuy residency program. And I'm going to go over a little bit more detail shortly. Next slide. So for both residency programs, the format is the same. So it'll run from January to December. Financially, the program offers a total of $25,000, $15K in honorarium that just goes to the artists directly, and $10K for production costs to go toward the project. Some of the non-monetary support includes the same series of workshops and trainings that the fellows will go through, as well as some, individual and group coaching sessions with a cultural organizing coach who we love. But some differences is that artists in residence also receive monthly meetings with LP program staff as sort of like check-in moments for your project and some direct support in carrying out those projects. As well as one-on-one mentorship with an art professional that is definitely directed by the artist. We try to make people's dreams come true with who they want to be connected with in the field. Additionally, there are public programming opportunities where artists and residents are invited to host an open studio session to feature their work in the commission project. And we have one coming up actually for an artist in residence this year in 2022 on September 17th. If you're interested to stop by the storefront then, and you can find some more information online about that. But yeah, so open studio sessions are public programs that you will have access to as a resident. And just kind of thinking of the cohort more broadly, we are selecting 3 artists in residence for the citywide residency and 1 artist for the Bed-Stuy residency program. And I also just wanted to say, feel free to drop questions in the chat or the question box as we're going along. We'll definitely have a Q&A section at the end. I just wanted to extend that to you. Next slide. Okay, so we're transitioning into residency eligibility. So for the Artist in Residence program, we're selecting 3 folks, like I said, and there's a special note for 2023 only associated with that. So in accordance with some generous funding that we received from the New York City Community Trust Van Leer Fellowship, the 3 Artist in Residence project for 2023 must each include at least 1 artist between the ages of 21 to 30 as of the start of the program that is in January 2023. So I think it's just important to bring up, we do offer collectives to apply to the residency. So groups of folks who work together toward a project. And for those collectives, only 1 member of the collective would need to be between 21 and 30 this year, as this feature and this funding is kind of being incorporated into this program. But in 2024, I can guarantee that this age kind of restriction wouldn't exist. So next slide. And as we're going into the rest of the residency eligibility, I just highlighted that difference there. Eligible candidates are between 21 and 30, in alignment with the LP's values and principles, creative practices, have a creative practice that demonstrates a record of public engagement. Also, in general, have the capacity to work in a group, and also just like have a background in community organizing and outreach strategies. These are some of the things that we also look for outside of the things that are listed here. Candidates should be currently based in New York City and be committed to creating a community art project. And I would say finally are familiar with the cultural history and issues impacting the community that they're proposing to work with. So some similarities and differences between the residency. All right, so the next one. So for the Bed-Stuy residency, you're gonna have basically very similar to the artist in residence. The highlighted purple bits are the ones that are same. The Bed-Stuy residency is open to anyone but over the age of 21 and over, and have a familiarity with the cultural history and local issues affecting Bed-Stuy specifically in Brooklyn. So just thinking about, again, this is a neighborhood of geography we're thinking about Bed-Stuy. And we're also looking for somebody who lives, works, or just shows demonstrated investment in Bed-Stuy. So you don't have to currently be living in Bed-Stuy to apply to that, just kind of thinking about dynamics of gentrification and things like that. But we do ask that you do live in one of the 5 boroughs, as is a requirement throughout all of our programs. Next slide. And I just wanted to pull up the priority statement for the Bed-Stuy residency for this application cycle, and also for all of our kind of community engaged, community facing opportunities to help counter structural and systemic injustices of displacement and gentrification in Bed-Stuy. We prioritize applications from generational and long-term residents, applications from individuals who identify as Black, Indigenous, Native, and/or people of color, applications from individuals in the disability community, including immunocompromised individuals, and applications from individuals who identify as LGBTQIA+. Again, this is a priority statement that we uphold throughout all of our opportunities, thinking about structural injustice. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to transition to pulling up the application and just walking you through some of that. So in general, all of our opportunities are listed on our submittable. And so if you go to laundromatproject.submittable.com, you'll arrive at our landing page and you'll be able to see, let's see, all 3 of the applications that we have. And so I am just gonna quickly walk through the fellowship application, because the fellowship application really serves as kind of the basis for the other 2. Like the fellowship has the most consistency throughout the 3 applications, and then I'll go into some other details with the other ones. Alrighty, so to start off, we just collect some basic demographic information here from you, including a bio, a resume, some optional fill-ins for website or artist statements, and also just ask if you need any accommodations to further access. You can hit prefer not to share at this time, but we're just kind of also thinking about ways that we can begin to expand access for our programs and also support you throughout the process, even uplifting tech as something that we need access to participate in the program. So just wanting to hear a little bit more about that. And then we go into our first question of what is your motivation for applying to the Create Change Fellowship? This is a question that'll exist again across all 3 applications. And this is just to gauge, what brought you to this moment of wanting to apply, what in your journey as a practitioner, an artist, a community organizer, healer, is the thing that you are resonating, are meditating, resonating on the most. And that aligns with our program at this moment. So that is a little bit about that question. You can submit a written response. You can also submit a video for that. The second question is, what LP values resonate with your creative practice and why? And Andrea went over our 7 values earlier, and you can click through and learn more about them here from our website. Again, this is just a question to gauge, I think, program alignment. You can literally just look at the questions and free write a response to which one of the values speak to you the most in that moment, speak to your practice, and just tell us a little bit more about that. And then for the fellowship in particular, fellows will be incubating and executing a group project within Bed-Stuy. And so we just wanted to learn a little bit more about your relationship to Bed-Stuy. We're not requiring any kind of specific project ideas, but, and we do acknowledge that this is a learning program, but we do kind of want to get a sense of how you would approach working within community. And so that's a little bit more about that question, in addition to what working in community means to you. And I will add that in the residency applications, you're going to see more of a expanded community section, just for us to understand your context, your relationship again to your community, because it's important to us that you are working within your own community. So that's going to exist there. Work samples is another portion that you'll see, just anything that shows your creative practice in the scope of the past 5 years, and all of these formats, all of these directions here. And you can also always email us if you have any questions or run into any issues as you are trying to work through this application. And lastly, we have this reference portion here. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that you don't need a letter of recommendation for any of our opportunities. You just need the name of a professional or community member reference who can speak to your creative practice more generally, or your work within community. And if you advance to the second round of our process, we will be contacting this person. So that is a little bit more about that. And then we have some optional demographic information that the review panelists won't have access to. It's just for internal kind of purposes and how we're tracking our programs. And that is it for the application. And then I'm just going to quickly go over a few points that are going to be specific just for the residency application. Perfect, thank you. So all the bones are going to be very similar, like I showed you. But for both the residency applications, we're going to want to see a project proposal in detail, including a timeline. Like it's a year-long residency. So we're going to, we really want to see what you're thinking month to month, as well as the scope of what you're kind of thinking of working on throughout the year with your community. We also have, like I said, questions to gauge your relationship with community. So it's going to be a more beefy community engagement portion. We also asked for a project budget, and there's a template that's linked within that application. You can click on it, download the PDF and just type into it. It's a fillable PDF. So just to make that a little easier. And then we also have an additional question that's a fellowship consideration question. And that one is just saying that if you aren't selected for the artist in residence opportunity, would you like to be considered for the fellowship? So you don't have to submit 2 separate applications. We can just pull over your application if you select that box, and the same will go for the Bed-Stuy residency. And the only differences between the Bed-Stuy residency and all of them is that we have more specific questions to gauge your familiarity with Bed-Stuy, not just your relationship, but how familiar you are, because it is Bed-Stuy specific. And then the priority statement that I went over is gonna exist on the application as well. All right. Next
Thank
slide.
you, Tiara.
No problem.
Wow, taking a nice sip of water. Thank you for that. So now let's jump into the open call. The applications close on September 14th, and we are planning to complete the selection process by November. The key dates noted in the next, can we go to the next slide? Here are the key dates. After the application closed, the OP staff will review all applications and select a short list to advance to the next round. So I would just do a screen grab of this, guys. Let's go to the next slide. The next round for the residents consists of interviews on Friday, October 28th and Saturday, October 29th, with our Artists and Community Council jury panel. Each interview will last around 30 minutes and is formatted around a 5-minute project pitch by the artist and then a Q&A with the jury. If you are a part of the collective, we would like to speak with all members. This interview panel will be conducted virtually, and in attendance is mandatory for one to be considered for the program. So please hold these dates on your calendar. Fellowship candidates will be asked to submit additional materials as part of their second round process. There will be no interview for the fellows this year. Following the second round process, we will call the reference you indicate in the application, so please provide the correct contact information. Letters of recommendation are not required. Next slide.
Alrighty, so we're gonna transition to a moment where you all can hear from a program participant named Melania Graham. And so we're just working on the back end to get Melania here and promoted up to the panelist level. But as we do that, I'm just going to introduce Melania really quickly. So Melania is a Create Change artist who participated in the fellowship program in 2018 to carry out a project in community similar to this year's program structure. So Melania can speak to that. And they are also part of a collective called Dream Seed, who were awarded a 2021 Artist in Residency. In 2021, Melania and their collaborators created the Dream Seed Oracle deck, inspired by the artist's Black and POC queer ancestors and holistic wellness practices. They hosted virtual conversations on tarot's relevance to generational collective healing, and led workshops on design, self-portraiture, and sacred adornment to inform the creation of the deck. Okay, I'll now pass it over to you, Melania. You can turn your camera on. Or just go off mute in general.
Hi.
Hi, we heard you say hi, but yeah, could you just tell us a little bit more about your experience in the programs?
Sure. I'm trying to get on screen, but it says the host has disabled the video. Um, so yeah, I am happy to be here. So I was in the fellowship in 2018. That was a fun experience. I'm from the Bronx, so I was living in the Bronx then. And the program placed me with a cohort of artists, all based in the Bronx. And so we were working with the Kelly Street Garden. And the culmination of that project was a wellness zine. So over the few months of that year, we worked with the garden, the owner of the garden, the people on the block. It was like a co-ownership of the garden. So everyone was like, it was like you could come in and out whenever you wanted to. Oh, I just got a notification. This is so much better. Okay. It was weird talking to a black screen. So yeah, the program was great. I can actually share with you the final project that we did. I don't know if you have any specific questions. I think that would help.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, I guess, if you can, I know you just talked a little bit about the fellowship, but if you can just walk us through what your experience, being within a collective kind of in a pandemic year was like as a resident, and maybe tell us about one of the workshops that you all led, I think that just starting there, I think would be great.
Sure. So the decision to apply for the residency came really, it was like a flash in the pan. We were like really, exhausted from just the idea of the pandemic, what we had already been through. And so me, Malika, and Blaze, we just decided to create a collective that basically was honoring and sharing with our community the things that we already spoke about in our friendship group. So after bringing the idea to them, we working on the application, which I think is probably one of the most intimidating parts of any grant application process, besides, getting accepted or rejected. We organized our time, our work. We created Google Drives, folders to keep our ideas and our tasks organized. So that was a really, really big thing that helped us move pretty smoothly despite the fact that the pandemic was so overwhelming and you literally didn't know what was going to happen the next day, the next week. So yeah, we worked really closely with each other, with our friends. So application process next was to get into actually forming our processes for planning the seed table talks, which is the title of the virtual series that we did. And then the dream shoots, which is a series of the photo shoots in community of Black, Indigenous, queer and trans people in our community, mostly in Brooklyn, because that's where we lived at the time, but a few people came from out of state. And it was a lot of work. For the dream shoots, we had to come up with a process of booking people. Taking care of our community meant making sure that everyone had vaccinations, were comfortable wearing masks in the indoor spaces that we were taking photos in. The outdoor spaces, not so much, but we just made sure to have like social distancing. We worked really collaboratively with artists that we already knew. So we were able to share resources, like materials for our sets, camera equipment. The LP was really helpful in getting us access to materials for the arts. And I can show you some flyers of our C table talks. I'm not sure if I have access actually. Oh, I do. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so that's actually from the fellowship. The next link that I sent is yeah, perfect. So the process of booking people was like making graphics, making sure that we're clear in our emails, doing FAQs. So like the first couple times that we got people together for photo shoots and virtual talks, we started realizing like the general questions that people would ask continually. So FAQs in our emails, to organize these talks and these virtual talks and photo shoots. So what you're seeing are some flyers that we created for our virtual talks. They will be available on our YouTube channel towards the end of this year. And I'm happy to speak about either one of them. I guess, can you go to the last one? That was actually really important. Part of the residency, yeah, this Griot Circle one, part of the residency was partnering with a community organization. And so we partnered with the Griot Circle, and they are an organization that serves Black queer elders. And so with Dream Seed, we basically bridge that gap between youth and the elders. I believe those conversations between us don't really happen on the topic of spirituality. So we wanted to bridge that gap. And they were really excited, of course, nervous, because like it can get personal and like, you know, depending on what people want to share, what they don't want to share. But overall, it was really amazing. They actually want us back to do some programming later this year. Yeah, and so during this tarot talk, we just went through the history of tarot in Black and Indigenous communities. What else? We did some tarot readings for them. This one was actually in person. We just had some coffee. Yeah, it was great. So we had a few workshops with them, and we are still connected with them. And once the deck is published, which we are projecting fall 2023, after it goes through publishing, editing, and all of that stuff, we are going to send some of the proceeds to Griot Circle, just because they've been so instrumental in us like rounding out and expanding our ideas of community, of like spirituality, and yeah.
That's perfect. Thank you so
much.
much.
No, I spoke so much. Yeah.
No, that was wonderful. You have a rich, I think, relationship with the organization and such rich work. So I definitely appreciate that. I guess my last question for you is, what's something that you might have like wanted to know before participating in the program?
Honestly, I feel like there isn't information that I should have known or feel like I could have known before doing the work. You know, I feel like LP provided all the information that I needed. It also helped to have been in the fellowship and to know kind of like the styles of communication for the LP. And so I could, you know, focus more on just communicating with my collective members. So what I wish I would have known, maybe just better project management skills, budgeting. Not that anything bad happened, you know, just like, I think it would have been better to make the process more efficient. Yeah, being an independent artist and organizing like large get-togethers of people who don't necessarily know each other is a big deal. And especially when they're all interested and passionate about spirituality and about making their own images, and sharing that widely, I think, yeah, we learned as we went. But of course, it's always good to have like just practical skills. Yeah, just project management, budgeting, communication. And yeah.
Thank you. No, that's perfect. I think these are things I'm hearing and I'm taking also, as we're a program we're folks who like to evolve and change and be relevant to our artists. So like in this moment, I'm like, yes, practical skills, and just thinking about the ways that we can like continuously support you as an alumni artist, but also, you know, all of the folks who go through the Create Change program to really develop these real practical skills that we need to eat and live in this work. So I really, really appreciate it. And if anybody has any direct questions, I think for Melania, you can feel free to drop them in the Q&A, since they'll be sticking around as we transition to the Q&A section, which is now. But thank you so much, Melania, for sharing a little bit more about your work. And I see you dropped your site. So definitely follow their work. The Dream Seed Collective's work is amazing. And we're just honored to have supported that project in 2021, and also to be continuously staying on your radar and hopefully supporting in the future as alum. We have a number of like program opportunities for alums who've gone through the program, including a micro grant fund. So yes, very excited about this. So a few of you submitted questions beforehand, so we just wanted to touch upon those really quickly. And then if there are any other additional questions that you have in the chat or the Q&A, we can address those as well. Okay, so a question that we got from a person who registered for this session was, will there be a capstone for the selected candidates to fulfill? And so to this, I can say, I don't think there'll be like an official kind of like capstone, but I think that for the fellowship program, it's a 6-month program that really works toward creating some sort of public engagement within community alongside our organization, and will be in Bed-Stuy this year. And so I think the project definitely goes through 3 months of workshops and really kind of like learning about our methodology, learning about what it means to like enter into a community and exist in it and transition out of it, right? So a lot of like practical skills that we're hoping that you actively learn in the workshops, and then you're able to apply to the practice-based component of the program. And so it will ultimately culminate into that program, and then a presentation about how that process was for you. So that's a little bit about the process for the fellowship. And then for the residency, it's a year-long program. I think we really lean into community, right? And lean into the artists really kind of being guided by the community that they're working within and kind of following the rhythms of that community. And that's really what we allow to kind of like happen as it does naturally throughout the year. The residency, a lot of residencies projects do have like culminating moments, right? Just kind of thinking about the work that has happened throughout the year. So that's something that exists within their own kind of work. But there also is a final presentation moment that exists in November for the residents. So the fellowship and residency both have final presentations at the end of the program. If you have any kind of additional questions, feel free to email us. I'll share the email at the end, but I hope I answered that one well. Next slide.
Great. And then the next question is, do you have to live in New York? The answer is yes. You have to live in New York City, 5 boroughs. You know, we as the LP do always prioritize our community, and we're here to serve the New York City community. And right now it's focused on Bed-Stuy, and we'll touch base on that again at the end. Next slide.
Yes, and I can also add to your question, Andrea, that we're New York City wide for the residency and for the fellowship, right? So you can apply from outside of, you have to live in the city, but in general, those projects occur in the 5 boroughs for the residency. And then the Bed-Stuy residency is Bed-Stuy specific in the ways that you're working. And the fellowship will also occur within Bed-Stuy. So hope that's helpful. And then since this year's 2nd round fellowship application doesn't include an interview, what will it consist of instead? So yes, so for the fellowship 2nd round, we're gonna reach out to folks to ask for some additional information, kind of like supplementary materials. And we're really kind of focusing on, in those materials, like how you work in a group. So a question that will be focused toward like what your kind of like practices, what your like group style of work is. And we're also going to ask more questions about kind of like more kind of like community focused questions, like what similar to like what does working community mean to you, that I went over earlier. So we're gonna ask you to submit a video response to that. It should be like super quick and not taxing, hopefully. And yeah, so that's the second round for the fellowship.
And TR, it looks like in our Q&A, someone asked, can I apply for the Create Change Fellowship if I'm over 30 years old?
So yes, so the fellowship program and the Bed-Stuy residency program, you're able to apply as 21 up, like up, there's no limit or cap. So you're able to apply to the fellowship. Yes.
Thank you for that. And then we have another question that says, for the residency program, can we apply to both?
Okay, yeah, so can you apply to both the artist in residency and the Bed-Stuy residency? So yes, I think within the applications, we do have these little check boxes, essentially. So you don't have to submit 2 applications to be considered for either opportunity. So you'll see within the application, like, you know, if I'm not selected for this, can I be considered for that? And you can go ahead and indicate that on the application, but you don't have to submit 2.
Okay. And then this one is actually for you, Melania. They say, congratulations on all things to come. I was wondering how your experience work with the other fellows of the Create Change Fellowship. What was the most valuable thing you felt you have learned?
Thank you. So I just want to clarify, during the fellowship, it was all in person. It was 2018. So the experience will be very different for folks currently. But the experience, well, I enjoyed it. I love getting to learn about artists who were local to me. It definitely expanded my horizons in terms of like connections and networks. Working with Kelly Street Garden specifically was amazing. There were a lot of families on the block. So we got to be familiar with them. It was important to attend the fellowship workshops because that really helped us enter and exit the community in a very, what's that word? It's in the workshop name. But basically doing it in a way that respects the community. So like entering and exiting, being that you're not necessarily part of the community, you don't live on the block, but you're there to like share and provide creative opportunities. So that was important. And then, yeah, I just learned how to garden. There was a lot of social time with my cohort. So we got to know each other outside of making art. I think that's it. Hopefully that helped.
Thank you for that. And I think we have one last question that we can answer in this time. Someone said, I'm curious about the project proposal. Are participants expected or encouraged to change their project after training and dialogue with community members? It's a great question.
Yeah, let me take a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The project after training and dialogue with, well, I will say that, so the proposal that residents submit with is definitely, I think, the thing that drives their work throughout the year, but we're really big on what it means for folks who are working in community to be following community rhythms, as I said. So we're not gonna, you know, if there's a portion of your application that's like, I'm gonna host something on April 25th, like that's like going to be one of the biggest things I have, you know, as a part of my residency. But then you realize that April 25th is also like the biggest block party that ever happens on that block. You know what I mean? We're not gonna hold you to like not following community rhythms and realizing like, oh, maybe, you know, I had this kind of idea, but as I'm working with and co-creating in community, I'm actually being shifted this way and that way. We're definitely people who focus more on the process of working than the product. I think, and though in many ways, both are important to the work. So yes, I think we encourage you to follow your community and to co-create with them intentionally.
Thank you. And I think we will all plan to share out more answers and questions, but please feel free to email us at apply@laundromatproject.org with any further questions regarding Create Change. But we also want to take this opportunity, the programs team, to also highlight another program that is open right now. If you can, yep. We have the Create and Connect Microgrant Fund. And I really want to go over the what, why, and how about this. So the Bed-Stuy Create and Connect Fund is a microgrant fund for creative initiatives and projects that are rooted in community, foster connections, and ignite conversations and collaborations. The purpose of the fund is to support and see creative ideas and civic actions of artists and cultural practitioners, community builders, organizers, and makers in Bed-Stuy. The fund will provide 25 projects or proposals with $1,000 each. So far, we've given out 5. So we have 20 slots available. If you have any great ideas or friends, please help us spread the word. Next slide. And on this slide, I really want to go over the eligibility. We've listed who is eligible to apply, what kind of projects are considered eligible. So let's start with who the Bed-Stuy Create and Connect Fund is open to: self-organized groups or collectives, meaning informal groups. So this could include sewing clubs or writer groups, for example. It's also open to formally organized groups like block associations or tenant associations. Individuals are also eligible to apply as long as they're 18 years and older, and they live and work and are committed to invested in the Bed-Stuy community. You do not have to live in the Bed-Stuy community to apply, but the project does have to have an impact in Bed-Stuy and engage with residents. What projects are eligible to get funded? Proposals must be responsive to or centered within the Bed-Stuy neighborhood and community. This is hyper-local fund that values that legacies embedded in place, which means that being responsive to and impacting Bed-Stuy and Bed-Stuy residents is really important. Proposals must also focus on community building, community recovery, and collective wellness within Bed-Stuy. I also want to say our application is available at Submittable, as Tiara mentioned. All are there, and it closes on September 1st. You can email me directly, Andrea@laundromatproject.org, if you have any questions regarding the Create and Connect Fund.
Next slide. Thank you so much, Andrea, for that quick plug of Create and Connect microgrant. If you have any interest there, feel free to apply. But thank you all for joining us for the 2023 info session for our upcoming Create Change season. Thank you, Melania, for gracing us with your presence and telling us a little bit about your work. Follow Dreamseed, visit the website, definitely support their work. And yes, thank you to the team behind the scenes on the slides and in the chat for making everything happen. And yes, I wanted to just remind you that a recording of this session will be available on our YouTube channel in the coming days. And as we've said on and on throughout the session, feel free to email us at apply@laundromatproject.org if you have any additional questions about this process at all. And we look forward to reading your application. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.